right, Ty. Based on those conversations that you've had with those various writers and based on your own perspective on this football team, they're going to spring practice here. And
Yeah.
what do they need to work on? What
Uh,
are the priorities?
oh my gosh. They're going to be without Drew Sanders. And I made a comment a couple of weeks ago. Some people didn't really like, but I said, you don't have another Drew Sanders on defense. And they don't, Mark. Drew Sanders was a big-time 5-star, went to Alabama. He was good enough to get some time there. And then, thank God, thanks to Michael Schur and Barry Odom, you pull him here. And he was outstanding. I mean, he graded out high as a guy that could cover. And obviously he could pass rush when they lined him up off the ball. When they lined him up out in the flats, shooting off the line of scrimmage, he could chase down quarterbacks. I was a little shocked that the NFL Combine actually has him at 6'4". Standing next to him, I would have thought 6'6". Of course, he's got cleats and a helmet on, but very long torso, long. It looked like he had long arms, really good reach, something that's so important for these edge rush guys. They don't have another Drew Sanders on this defense. They do, however, have a potential who I think could be, by the time he leaves Arkansas, an All-American caliber linebacker in Christopher Paul, who is a freshman All-American. Now, he's smaller. He's not going to, I mean, who knows, but he's not the kind of guy you're going to expect to line up off the edge and rush the quarterback. He's going to play that. He's going to be more on the ball. He's not Drew Sanders, but he is a terrific linebacker. 6'3", I forgot his weight, 235 maybe. Really active kid, smart, good head on his shoulders on the field, just a terrific player. I mean, he stood out in camp. He stood out in practice. Really good player. Did not shock me when he made freshman All-American. They've also got Jordan Crook. They've got Manny Powell. They've got some names at linebacker, but that is going to be a spot to keep an eye on. I mean, listen, you asked me, I'm going to tell you they're all spots to look at, to keep an eye on. But I would say areas of concern, I would probably say tight end on offense. Trey Knox transferred to South Carolina, and that was I think that was a pretty significant loss. When you look, they're going to have to lean on probably either Nathan Bax, or they're going to have to rely on a freshman or a redshirt freshman, Ty Washington. So there's a lot of questions at tight end for me. But wide receiver, I love what they did in terms of recruiting there, Mark. I mean, they went out and they got this Tyrone Broden kid out of Bowling Green who's 6'7", 6'6", 210. Isaac Tesla. I think it's actually pronounced Tesla, but I don't know. Tesla's just sounds cooler. Tesla was, I mean, if you watch his videos on YouTube, I posted something a little while back on Twitter. That dude, he looks like he has a catch radius very similar to Treylon Burks. And ironically, he's similar in size. Now, I'm not comparing him to Treylon Burks, so please pump your brakes before you start coming at me with, how dare you compare him to Burks. But he very similar measurables in terms of, he's rumored to be a low 4.5 guy. Well, that's what Burks ran at the NFL Combine. Rumored to have a 40-inch vertical. He's got a video where he's just making these one-handed grabs. In another video, he's beating DBs who take an angle on him, and it looks like they have a pretty good angle, and he's still doing a pretty good job of beating them. Now, again, I don't know how legit that 4.5 40 is, because coming from a small school, that's a hand time 40. So he might be slower than that. I don't know, but he's pretty athletic. He's definitely got a great leap. If you watch him, good. He looks like, from highlight videos, he looks like he's got pretty good hands. Tesla's a guy that a lot of people are excited about. Tyrone Broden, again, that tall wide receiver, lengthy. They also pulled Andrew Armstrong, another wide receiver, out of Texas A&M. It's not A&M. It's like, I forgot. It's some small school out of Texas. But Andrew Armstrong, 6'3", 180 pounds. But I'm still concerned there because you don't have there's no proven depth there, right? You don't have someone that you look at and you're just like, oh my God, this guy, potential first team all conference, second team all conference. They don't have that we know of yet. So I've got questions in certain areas on the offense.
Broden, 7 touchdown receptions, 32 catches there at Bowling Green last season, 74 catches in his career.
Yeah. Oh, someone asked me. I'd love to know what Ty thinks of the coordinator situation for the Hogs.
I don't know if they're alluding to anything in particular that's happened or just your assessment of both sides of the ball.
So we know they Barry Odom went to UNLV. He's a head
Yep.
coach over there. And then they lost Kendall Briles in a very bizarre situation. I still don't know what to make of that. It was so strange. I guess Sam Pittman didn't like that he kept his name out there, I guess, to be for someone like TCU to come and, offer him. Or I really don't understand that what really happened in that situation. Very bizarre. I think TCU got themselves a pretty good offensive coordinator, Dan Enos. And I guess I haven't talked to you since they hired Dan Enos. I'm just now realizing that. We know he was here in 2015, put up incredible numbers. I mean, Brandon Allen, oh my God. I really think Brandon Allen could look back on his career and go, without Dan Enos, I'm not sure I'm still in the NFL. Now, him as a quarterback developer, that's what Dan Enos does. He develops quarterbacks. That's what he does. He was at Maryland the last couple of years. Somewhat balanced attack. He had Tua Tagovailoa's little brother as a quarterback at Maryland. He's not an offensive coordinator that's on an upwards trajectory. So a lot of Hog fans not super thrilled that he's back. I think it's an interesting fit because KJ, who's a proven quarterback in this league, we know what he is. You know what you're getting out of a KJ Jefferson. The backfield, Mark, is just loaded. I think this is one of the top 2, top 3 backfields in the SEC, and that's saying a lot. The offensive line situation, we'll see where they're at. They're going to be without Dalton Wagner, without Ricky Stromberg. Those are 2 interesting losses. Those are 2 guys that could get drafted. Stromberg certainly will, I believe, get drafted. We'll see about Wagner. He's kind of got his work cut out for him there, tight end, wide receiver, like I just mentioned. I see that as a year one. To me, I'm expecting pretty good numbers. Again, you have a leader in KJ, a guy that knows this league now. He's been a starter for 2 years. His redshirt freshman year, he started on the road against Mizzou and put up great numbers, was fantastic against a pretty salty defense at the time. Comes back the next year and puts on a show, and then this last year, he was obviously really good. Dan Enos, it feels like he's walking into a pretty good situation when you talk about the backfield and the quarterbacks. And I think the offensive line should be better, or at least close to being where they were at last year. And they kind of fell apart there towards the end of the season. I like the hire year one. After that, Mark, I do not know what to expect. I really don't. I don't know if this is a good long-term thing or not. If he's here for 4 years, let's say 3 years, right? Kind of the average lifespan of a coordinator at a place like Arkansas. I don't know if it'll be a good ending to his story or not at Arkansas. I don't know if he'll leave it better than the way he found it, because Kendall Briles did a pretty good job here. I had issues with him. I certainly did. His red zone numbers were not good. Scoring offense, really, up until the bowl game, was not good. Now, the bowl game, you looked really good because you played a typical Big 12 defense. You should rack up touchdowns and offense against a Big 12 defense, and they did that. So his numbers were a little bit inflated. I think overall Kendall was at least a pretty good offense coordinator, maybe even peaking on a really good coordinator for Arkansas. I did have issues with him in the red zone and his scoring. They were very up and down, not real consistent there. Dan Enos, you want to say he's got big shoes to fill. Year one, he could fill them. After that, I don't know. Now, for the defense, Travis Williams, he's an up-and-comer. We know he has history with Auburn. He was down at UCF for a couple of years, known to be a really good recruiter. He's known to be a good players coach. I love that they brought Marcus Woodson on to be a co-defense coordinator who's going to help with the secondary. They've also brought on Darren Wilson, who's going to help out with the secondary. He has history. I couldn't tell you. I know he's with Southern Miss for a little while. They're really trying to tackle the issues in the secondary this year, Mark, because they were so bad in pass defense last year. It was abysmal how bad they were. It was really tough, and they're trying to address that. And I really think Sam has done a good job of at least trying to address it. It may not work out. We don't know, But Marcus Woodson apparently has had quite a bit to do with Florida State's secondary and their coverage plan last year. Sound like I'm selling you cell phone coverage. The Florida State cell coverage was fantastic last year on the field. And they believe that Marcus, I mean, from what I've read and listening to Florida State fans and watching them on Twitter, they feel like Marcus Woodson had a lot to do with that. So he's going to come over. He's going to help with that at Arkansas. You've got Quincy McAdoo back, right? You've got some pieces back. They've got Hudson Clark back at middle safety. Dwight McLaughlin, who's considered, according to Pro Football Focus, as one of the top corners coming back in the SEC. They should be better in a lot of areas. Now, I don't know if they're going to be better at getting after the quarterback because, like I said, you're without Drew Sanders. You're not going to have that elite edge rush guy. You've got Landon, the young Jackson. Is that his name? Am I farting on his name? The defensive end from LSU. It's been a while since I've talked about him. Huge guy. They've got him back. He'll be a redshirt. What is he, a sophomore? But the defense is going to look different. The offense is going to look different. You're going to see more pistol formation, right? You're going to see Enos has implemented RPO. I was watching his Maryland film. He has implemented RPO into his offense. He has adapted his offense. I think something he's really good at doing is calling the kind of offense that the offense is capable of running. Whatever kind of personnel he has, that's what he's going to try and utilize. He's not going to just straight up stick with one particular brand. Like, he's not like an air raid guy, no matter where he goes. He's going to run with what he can work with. But you will see a lot of pistol, right? They're going to, like I said, they're going to run RPO. Probably going to be a run-heavy team again this year. And why not? You're loaded to do that. But overall, I have really good opinions on these hires. I mean, again, the tight end coach, Morgan Turner, this guy was at Stanford and churned out. It was an NFL. They're just an NFL product at tight end. That was a great hire for Arkansas. We'll see if these guys can all adapt what they did really well and bring it together and bake a really delicious pie in Fayetteville, because they're going to need to. Fans aren't super thrilled about the Enos hire overall. They're not blown away by the Travis Williams hire. And I don't blame them. These aren't big names, but Arkansas football's not really been in a position to hire those kind of names in a while. Not that they never have been, because they certainly have, but lately they're still trying to build up that reputation. So we'll see what happens, but it's going to be a very interesting spring camp. It's going to be, I'm hoping I get some access to it with a press pass. I'm hoping I get opportunities to go see it in person, and can't wait. If I do, can't wait to talk about it. That's for sure.
Let's go with recruiting. And Chris, I guess we'll lead off with you in regards to big recruiting weekend for FSU.
Yeah, it was a really good recruiting weekend. There was a bunch of former Noles that were scheduled to come to help with the recruiting weekend. The majority, in my opinion, showed up. You had people like Deshaun Corbin, Jermaine Johnson, Keir Thomas, Jameis Winston, and a few others to mention that came. There was a couple that missed out because they were traded in the NFL or had some issues going, like Derwin James. He had a family issue to deal with. And then Jalen Ramsey was actually traded to the Miami Dolphins as he was going to head to Tallahassee. So he might as well figure out how to move to Miami because that's where he's going. But as far as recruit-wise goes, we had the biggest names for the 2024 class that's already interested in Florida State. Luke Krummenhoek came back and was a huge help to what Florida State was trying to accomplish with all of the movement as far as who we're trying to get in this class. And then Jalen Winston received a offer from Florida State this past weekend as Jameis was on board with us. So Florida State's doing a phenomenal job of getting the top names on campus. When you go from Luke Kromenhawk, and then you've got your 5-star wide receivers, and then you've got your 5-star DBs and 5-star DNs and stuff like that. But what's different, in my opinion, is how excited they actually are. They come out of respect most of the time. Like last year, I think a lot of it was a respect thing. This year, they're actually excited to be there. And then we've got coaches that are, I don't want to say it the wrong way, but they're walking with a bigger stride than they had before. They have more confidence, and it attracts the young people. The more confidence you have, the more attractive you are to them. So I'm very impressed with what Florida State was able to pull off this weekend. It was a huge event, and I don't want to name certain kids because I don't have the list in front of me on who does not want to be spoken about, because there is a list of guys that did not want to be known to be there. So I will look that up while y'all cover something.
One high-profile quarterback who made his way to the SEC 1 year ago is, I got to think, much more comfortable in his spot, and that's one Jaden Daniels at LSU, of course, and an offensive line that was really baptized by fire early in the 22 season, should be ready to roll.
I'll tell you what, how in the world can you not like what's coming back at LSU? I mean, we saw what Daniels was able to do last year, and he was very impressive. The offensive line, to me, is what's impressive too, basically coming back intact. And then defensively, you've got Mason Smith. You remember the defensive lineman that was hurt in the opener against FSU, tore his ACL. He is back. They also have got on defense Denver Harris, a transfer from Texas A&M. I thought what Brian Kelly did in his first year was just pure magic, frankly. But look, if you're smart enough to break Newton Rockne's record at Notre Dame, there's not much else you can't do, and he's proving that at LSU. And I can tell you already, and I hope to be there. One of the games of the year is going to be the LSU Florida State rematch in Orlando. Now that's on Sunday night for our listeners of Labor Day weekend, which is an ideal time to have it. So, Mark, that might be the game of the weekend, frankly, because both those teams are going to be in the top 10, and one of them is not even in the top 5. Well, that wouldn't shock me, frankly, either. But again, I mean, Alabama's going to be good, especially once they find a quarterback. But your situation of, I can tell you right now, I think when we're in Nashville for SEC media days, that 1 and 2 is either going to be some combination of Bama and LSU.
Yeah, that LSU FSU matchup in New Orleans last year was basically a toss-up, and so it's a like situation from that standpoint, but both teams and programs have elevated considerably since that matchup 1 year ago. No question about that. Yeah, that should be a fun one on a Sunday night when they are going to have the national stage to themselves.
But a guy I really want to see talked about more, and he was the H1H recruit of this past class. Do you remember who that was, Mark? Edge rusher. No,
I don't.
Jaden Wayne, originally from I think it was Washington. I think it's from Washington. Now he plays for IMG Academy. He played for he's at Miami now, but played for IMG Academy. My favorite recruit. I mean, I was very skeptical, and I'll be honest with you. I was very skeptical because his film was him playing receiver and tight end and all that kind of stuff, right? But then I watched his senior tape, Mark, and he put on really, really, really good weight at IMG Academy. And he showed me something against that level of competition. He showed me that he could not only just run around and just fly off the ball, do the quick swim over and strip sack and scoop and score. He didn't just show that. He showed he could attack the edges. He could contain. He could loop around on those TE stunts and those ET stunts. He could take on double teams. He could take on pull. He could take on tight ends, wham blocks. He showed me the run support. And that was my only big question about Jaden Wayne. Could he stop the run? And he showed me. He showed me, man. He showed me a lot. I was very, very, very proud of his senior film of Jaden Wayne. Again, high school. Now, taking that to Miami. Again, he's going to have to do it against grown men at the Power 5 level. You know, he's have to do it against the Tallahassee offensive tackles, Virginia Tech offensive tackles, Texas A&M offensive tackles. So he'll get a chance to get out there and see what he can do. But as far as giving some people their roses and their praise for me, I'm really, really, really excited about Jaden Wayne.
And I do believe that May 1st is the first day of the transfer portal. But as we've experienced now through these various transfer portal cycles, there will be athletes that will get out ahead of that, and they will announce, even though they can't enter the transfer portal officially, that they will say, I am entering the transfer portal. So with an April 8th spring game, that gives Auburn fans a little bit more time to possibly be concerned, worry, stew about those players who may announce after the end of spring practice that they're entering the transfer portal before there's going to be as many players from the other side, from outside of the Auburn campus, that are potential candidates to join the Auburn football team.
Right. And I don't think there's so much worry going on the side of Auburn fans right now in terms of people transferring out. Not that we don't value all the athletes that are here and want them to stay and want us to find success with who we have. I think because we are at such a ground zero level with a coaching change, a regime change right now, it really is just kind of one of those things where what's wrong with some more change at this point. When you think about transfers, especially leaving, there's always been the speculation that TJ Finley, starting quarterback for part of the year last year, might transfer out after he finished his spring obligations academic wise. So that's still out there. I will tell you that there's at least some talk that he's been kind of lighting it up in spring camp so far. Again, it's only been one official week and one extra day of practice counting yesterday, but I'm starting to see a lot of people bring that up. Is TJ going to be able to really compete for this starting job? I don't think it's a question, can he compete? It's just maybe a question of, does he want to be here? And maybe this fresh perspective, maybe this regime change has kind of reignited, not just for him, but a lot of other players. So for me, I think that's the big one out there. We're going to lose some players because people are going to find they have less of an opportunity than they thought they were going to have. But at the same time, you know, I'm personally not worried so much about who's leaving. It's more of the excitement of what could we gain in the transfer portal, if that makes sense.
Kyle, what can you tell us about Philip Montgomery and what we can expect out of a Philip Montgomery offense?
Your question, that's a good question. And I wish I had a better answer for you on this one. I have not dove deep into what Philip Montgomery or Ron Roberts, the defensive coordinator, will do. I've heard wild variations on what it will look like. I do know this, that Auburn football is at its best, no matter who the coach is, no matter who the offensive coordinator is, when they put an emphasis on their run game. And when you look at the running backs that we have, even without Tank Bigsby, and by the way, did you see how much he lit it up at the NFL Combine? Just an absolute beast of a man, if anybody ever was questioning that. But Jarquez Hunter, Damari Alston, you're bringing in Jeremiah Cobb, one of the best running back commits and signees now that Auburn's had in probably since Tank Bigsby, just in terms of speculation, right? Jarquez Hunter has, outperformed those speculations and expectations. But the backfield is just primed and ready for Auburn to return to that hard-nosed, just identity that we've had in the running game. So my hope for Philip Montgomery is whatever he chooses, that is going to be at its core, because that's what Auburn fans just seem to latch on to. And obviously you don't want to be stuck in your ways, right? You need to be variable. We saw Brian Harsin and his various offensive coordinators, and I mean various because we had several of them, switch things up from time to time. You've got to go with what's flowing. And I do think Hugh Freeze, who is turning the reins over to Philip Montgomery, is going to give him that freedom to do so. But you know that we're going to have a little bit of flair in there. You've seen the Hugh Freeze offenses in the past.
Phil Montgomery, most notably head coach on the Group of 5 level. You addressed Robbie Ashford. So how much of Auburn Nation is satisfied with thinking that he is going to be the starting quarterback? Completed 49% of his passes. We've discussed a number of times with you the benefits and the limitations at this point. At least there's a lot of growth to be had as a passer, but the level of contentment going forward that he could once again be the guy.
Yeah. When I talk to people just out and about, there's a lot of, do you think we're going to get this guy in the transfer portal, as opposed to, oh, I'm excited about Robbie, if we're just talking about Robbie in this conversation. And I think that some of that's natural. The grass is always greener on the other side type of mentality. Everybody's trying to look for, what's the next biggest and best thing. And we tend to kind of overlook things. Bo Nix had a problem with that a lot, the people kind of overlooking maybe what we had, not saying he was the best out there, but we probably were a little bit better off with him remaining at Auburn if that could have happened. So for Robbie, as you've heard me say 1,000 times here, I'm really trying to encourage Auburn fans to get on board with him for now being considered the starter and letting us grow with him. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not going to be someone that comes in. That doesn't mean that TJ is not going to win the job and stay at Auburn. Doesn't mean that this, quarterback in Holden Gerner, who's behind him, even a Hank Brown might make some waves who came in with Hugh Freeze. There's a lot of options there, but I would say right now, when you talk to the general public, the question more so is who are we going to get rather than what do you think about Robbie? And that makes me a little sad for him, because I think he did a lot of things for us in a very tumultuous year that probably nobody else could have done, considering how our offensive line played. So I think we might need to appreciate Robbie a little bit more.
So regardless of what happens in any other sports, in particular men's basketball, is Auburn always a football school, or is that basketball team really vying for the affections of the Auburn sports fan?
I would argue this year we were more of a basketball school until the basketball team underperformed a little bit. And then there was some, we'll say some frustrations there as well. We pitch this, every bit of marketing we can. I do myself, and we mean it. We're an everything school. We love everything about Auburn, and so we will dive headlong into it. The proof really is in things in professional sports for Auburn. If you look at what will happen, or even just, maybe collegiate events such as the NCAA March Madness, look at the ticket prices for the session that Auburn is in versus some of the other schools out there. Now, granted, it's because we got the Birmingham Regional. That's obvious. But in professional sports, Jabari Smith, Walker Kessler, you've got Auburn fans tuning in nightly to watch him play. That's a demographic centralizing from, the Southeast that some of these teams that they play for probably never had. So there's a reason that when we say we're an everything school, we mean it. Auburn football will always be king. It will drive what our mood is. And if then basketball fails, then our mood will probably be even more sour. But we do try to live by us trying to be an everything school.
Kyle Loomis, E2C Network. It's everything Auburn, meaning it's not just football. It's just not men's basketball. It's women's basketball. It's baseball. Baseball is huge at Auburn. I know that from being down there for 7 years in the SEC, covering SEC baseball. It's unlike anywhere else in the country. Track everything that they do connected to Auburn University. They're on E2C Network. Kyle, appreciate you stopping by.
As always, I appreciate you having me, and hopefully we'll have a lot more to talk about next week with spring practice getting a little further underway.
James, we've had enough conversations that I know when I ask you a question, you're always amazing in answering the question. However, many times it's much more important what you've got on your mind as opposed to what I'm going to ask. So I want you to answer my question, but what's on your mind is always important to me to hear what what you've got on your mind. So I'll ask it this way to get us kicked off. These recruiting weekends, what we hear, there's got to be a deplorable, atrocious incident or just a bad experience for a player to come out. And we rarely see it where we know, okay, you didn't have a good recruiting, but otherwise they're going to say all the right things and say the nice things. So how do you come away from a situation like this and have a real indication that a player's leaning a certain way or had a good experience?
Well, one, you can measure it by how many times the young man has come on campus. So let's take a Cam Davis, for example. Now, people were very worried about his recruitment, but then when you sit back and you realize Cam has been to Florida State like 12, 13. Cam's been to Florida State more times than I have. And I'm alumni, and I'm from Tallahassee. So seeing that, and then you're hearing what he's saying, same thing with the Luke Cormahawk, same thing with some of the guys who are coming from the West Coast. Like there's a couple linebackers we're interested in, one from Texas, one from Cali, that are coming out this way. And I'm just gonna go with the belief that everybody figured out how to get there on their own. I don't know this stuff, but I'm just saying, even if they didn't, that's a lot of time, that's a lot of energy, that's a lot of resources being spent trying to get come just on an unofficial visit. And then it's the idea of not just this class, but the younger classes. I think three people who always tell you the truth. Old people on their last leg, kids, and alcoholics. They're going to typically give you a version of their truth that's going to be uninitiated. So if we don't believe the 2024s, we have no reason to not believe the 25s and the 26s. And they're getting guys who literally, the 26s ain't nothing but babies right now. So it's just it's very interesting and odd, but it's also the consistency in the message. If we go back and we look at what happened under the tag times, off-season unofficial visits weren't the norm like this. It was more the big recruiting weekends during the summer. So his camp and that last weekend in July. And out of those, you still heard things like unorganized. You heard things that were – and I think some of that had to do with the media. But even now, when you have the media, it just shows when you have the media, the staff, and everybody's on page and they're creating this narrative that's nothing but hype and nothing but not mysticism, but nothing but hype and encouragement. It comes through. And then one of the things that I like to do, and people can call me whatever they want to call me. I'm not a fan. I'm not a media. I'm family. It's a difference. But when I get a chance to talk to some of these guys, I talk to them in a position of a guy who, yes, I would love for all of them to come to Florida State, but I want them to be great men, young men. They're going to have to coach my kid one day, maybe. They're going to have to do some other things. So when I'm calling John Cromahawk, Luke Cromahawk's dad, just to figure out, hey, I want to talk with him. I want to chop it up. He's telling me these things, and he's just like, he's excited. One of the things that we have with these kids are being so independent, and we're teaching them to be brands, and a lot of their parents have never walked this path before. We see them to be so independent, but recruiting is still about winning mamas and daddies. And when the mama and the dad are very, very sold on this place, very few kids going to go against their mama and their dad. And when you got John, who's saw it from a 3D multi-generational approach. You saw the past nose, and you saw how Jermaine talked. You saw how James talked, and then he saw his the current nose, and he saw the future nose in his son, and he could see his son walking down that path. And I think that's what they're doing the best job of right now, is allowing people to see their son, and then they're surrounding them by success. Jermaine Johnson being an All-American, getting his brick laid in there. Jameis Winston being arguably one of the best quarterbacks to ever play at Florida State, one of the best college football players ever. And they're both playing in the NFL, which is the apex of what this dream can be for you. I mean, I guess really the top would be the Hall of Fame, but we won't see that for another 10 years for either one of them, 10, 15 years for either one of them. So to see the guys who have gone through the path, and you saw two different variations of it. One who came there as a freshman, had the red shirt, played another sport, figured it out. And then you see the other guy who went to a junior college, went to Georgia, one of the top programs in the nation, but got his accolades at Florida State. So as a young man, you can see, okay, well, I can bypass and I can go the long route, or I can cut all the BS out and go straight here. And when you have some of the top defensive ends in the nation, when you have some of the top quarterbacks in the nation, when you have some of the top wide receivers in the nation, some of the top DBs, and you mix them in with guys, again, another one like Jayshon Corbin, who a lot of people don't really bring up, but Jayshon was a phenomenal running back here at Florida State. Didn't get it done at Texas A&M, but got it done at Florida State. Wish he would have came back for another year. That'd have been crazy to see him, Trey Benson, Trayshawn Ward try to figure out how to get it done. But I think that's the way that the recruit. That's how you find out who's real and who's not. And then outside of that, recruiting is something that you have to continue to do. It's like it's a relationship. If you stop, you may not talk to your girl every day, but if you don't talk to her but for once every 2 weeks, I'm pretty sure she's going to have another guy creep in there that's going to give her the attention that she seeks. But if you're able to, make sure you got her every other day, or you got that thing managed real well, she likes the color red and likes roses, you make sure she gets roses every now and then, you're going to still be in there. And that's pretty much every coach that I've ever heard talk about recruiting in a off mic situation always says recruiting ain't nothing but running game.
And that yellow jacket comment you made about the Hall of Fame, that is no stretch. All you have to do is watch Derwin James play. We've known about Jalen Ramsey for a long time. Man, Derwin James, my goodness, that guy is a freak beyond belief, which we already knew, but he also transferred that into, NFL production. It's crazy how good he is.
I mean, like Jalen Ramsey, they didn't end up not coming. They were supposed to come, but they had, it's very difficult. All season is a combination of them training, getting better. And then this was the first week of free agency, so they probably needed to be where they needed to be at because they got a call. Obviously, Jalen just got traded to the Miami Dolphins. Well, you look at Jalen Ramsey, a guy who's been highly touted since he came out of Florida State and has not disappointed. His worst year, what everybody thought was last year, and he was still ranked the 5th overall DB in the nation. In the NFL. Probably should have been an All-Pro, at least a second-team All-Pro. But he was Pro Bowl. And when you look at a guy who I think the only time he didn't make the Pro Bowl was his rookie year. And his rookie year and this year, the only times he didn't make All-Pro. That is dominance. That is something that you can't help but see that he came from out of Florida State. So we have a lot of arguments and a lot of jokes and a lot of things about who's the DBU. Well, I'm going to put it like this. Ohio State and a lot of other schools may put out DBs. They get to the NFL. That's dope. But we put out DBs that stay and have people that become household names that kids say they want to be. Like. So, I think obviously you talked about Derwin, who's just a freak of an athlete. I love and both good young men. And what's my guy's name? The DB that plays with Derwin.
Asante Samuel.
Yes, Asante Samuels. Yeah. Again, he played lights out, and he's the one that everybody forgets about because he's on the team with Derwin James.
All right, Kentucky going to spring practice. What stands out to you as some of those things that you're going to be watching out for in the next month or so?
Spring practice started yesterday. And I think, as we've talked about, Kentucky's not going to have a spring game this year. They're installing a new field at Kroger Field. I still want to call it Commonwealth Stadium, but that's okay. So they're going to have like a special fan day with all kinds of things, activities where you can come out and see the team. It's going to be on April 1st. So that's a date for UK fans to keep in mind. And then obviously the biggest thing is everybody's just kind of following Devin Leary. He practice. We said he was going to practice. Stoops reiterated that he was out there with the first team yesterday. He's on, to use like a baseball term, they called it like a pitch count. He's only going to throw so many. They didn't say the number, but he's only going to throw so many passes, each day as he's still trying to get over that, pectoral injury that he had that ended his season last year. So obviously his, how he gels with Liam Cohen, and by all reports, just even in one day, Cohen, it's like they picked up right where they left off, in 2021. Of course, Cohen was here with Will Levis and they had such a great season. Then Cohen went to the NFL with the Rams. And Kentucky's offense struggled last year, and obviously the Rams' offense struggled last year too. But a lot of that had to do with injuries. But as you said, you see, 6 games. Leary played in 6 games. Then you go back. Obviously, what Kentucky fans are hoping for is what you're seeing there in 2021, where he was a finalist for the Johnny Unitas Award with the 35 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. So, I mean, that's those are some pretty impressive numbers. And if he can pull that off, in the SEC this year, Kentucky fans are going to be really, really happy. That's the biggest thing I think everybody's kind of watching, is just to see how how Leary, how quickly he gels with Cohen's offense and with receivers. We talked about Kentucky has their top 5 receivers back from last year, if you throw in running back Juton McClain. So you have, you got Barry and Brown, freshman All-American. You got Dane Key. You got Tavion Robinson coming back for another year. How quickly you see what Wan'Dale Robinson did 2 years ago here in this Liam Cohen offense, had the greatest season ever by a wide receiver at Kentucky. So everyone, you can't help but not be excited right now. But like I said, everybody's kind of watching Leary, and then obviously other things, the offensive line. Kentucky made upgrades to the offensive line because, you're obviously, we learned last year, your quarterback's not going to be if your quarterback's running for his life half the game, then his stats, that's obviously going to negatively affect your stats and how the game goes. So that's another thing that's, as far as the offense goes, that people will be watching. And I do want to throw out just real quick something that was announced today. The Pro Day, Kentucky's Pro Day, will be Friday, March 24th. And I guess you can call this the Will Levis effect, for lack of a better term. The SEC network is going to broadcast it live this year. So with and then the NFL network is going to be there too, but I think it's going to be like on their online thing. So there's 11 guys who are going to be taking part in it that were announced, and of course headlined by Levis, who of course was at the Combine last weekend and got clocked with 59 mile an hour pass. So which is it's pretty impressive. I think Richardson had a 60. Except I don't think Levis did anything to hurt his draft stock. I think the recent things I've seen, the Raiders with that 7th pick seem to be. I see Levis's name pop up there a lot with that pick, so I think it'd be a good landing spot for him. But circling back, we're all kind of on a Devin Leary watch right now, and just seeing how the spring goes, how he progresses in Cohen's system, and how quickly they gel with the receivers.
All right, Kevin. So they started practice yesterday. All right. Very good. Well, certainly let us know if anything pops up, if there's any kind of news or big updates out of Lexington.
Sure.
But moving on to the Garrett Riley interview and kind of him talking really not really the first time, but really for the first time since he's been involved with the Clemson offense and the Clemson players and really on the field with the team. He came out, he talked to the media. He talked a lot about keeping the offense simple, getting good at the simple things, getting good at the fundamentals. He talked a lot about dictating both pace and play to the defense. You've heard Clemson fans talk a lot about being sick of hearing certain coordinators that are no longer with us talk about taking what the defense gives us, and that could not be any further from the rhetoric that a Garrett Riley is pushing as our new offensive coordinator. He's talking about dictating play to the defense, dictating pace to the defense, him not really caring about if they know what's coming, that his idea is that Clemson gets so good at executing their offense that they will just out-execute the defense. They will out-talent the defense. They will out-scheme the defense, regardless of what they know is coming. He talked about one of his major goals here in the spring is to find this particular Clemson offense's identity. And I really like all the talk about, he really focused on evaluating the personnel, finding out what they're good at, whether they're good at, inside zone, whether they're good at, whatever the case may be,
and focusing on that and really developing his offensive scheme around what his personnel is good at. And that's really a breath of fresh air for me as a Clemson fan, right? So he's really focusing on finding this team's strengths and what they're good at and just rolling with that. And then adding to the offense, obviously, as the season goes, as you game plan for certain teams, you add certain things. Cade even had an interview earlier this week where he was talking about, how they spent basically 2 hours running the same 15 plays in different formations and different variations of the same 15 plays, and just really focusing on the fundamentals and the players being comfortable with everything that's going on the field. So I really like a lot of the stuff coming out of Garrett Riley. He's saying all the right things. He seems to understand the needs of the Clemson offense right now. What were kind of your takeaways from his press conference and, how he addressed the media?
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I liked a lot of what I was hearing. And one thing that he really touched on was, and something that was mentioned was, being, and it's kind of what you sort of kind of touched on, was being simple, and not just, the plays you're running, but simple in, how many plays are you carrying? I mean, I know Cade talked about, at one point, I think in the Orange Bowl, they carried like 80 different plays or
80 plays,
in the playbook. And Garrett Riley was like, well, it's certainly not going to be 80 with me. If we can trim it, we can trim it. And I think that's something that I think this Clemson offense has really needed, because I think there's a common misconception that being simple is the same as being simple and easy are not the same thing.
Right. Yeah.
And so, being, you can run a very simple offense, but it's very, very intensive and, attention to detail is important. And you have to, and that's kind of what the air raid is execution and repetition and getting so good at, a small number of plays that it's hard for the defense to stop it. And that kind of ties back into, dictating to the defense what you're going to do instead of trying to, take what the defense is giving you or
right.
Find the perfect play, because you are confident in your ability to run the play better than the defense can execute their own scheme. So I thought that was really, really huge. And it was really nice to hear. He mentioned how, for example, like the wide receivers, in past Clemson offenses, the wide receivers would, change sides and we would move guys around a bunch. And they had to be proficient at, playing on both sides of the field. And what Garrett wants to do is, keep guys to play the same position. Obviously, you're going to have guys move around within the side, and not, you're not going to have one guy just play outside the whole time. But, being able to play on one side and really master the plays from that one position is huge. And it will kind of take some pressure and take some of the thinking, out of the receiver play. And I feel like that'll be, I think that's going to be a huge benefit to these guys, especially the young guys, especially like the true freshmen that are still kind of learning. And I think that's one of the cool things is everybody's kind of starting off on a new slate, because yes, the plays themselves are not unfamiliar, and a lot of what Garrett Riley runs, there's a lot of similarities to what Clemson has run in the past, but how it's run, how it's called, the formations, and the simplicity of it is a lot different, and it makes it should. The goal is to make it more manageable for these guys and make it more manageable for the quarterback. I really liked what I was hearing from Garrett Riley from all of those standpoints. Like he has a really good grasp of what he wants this offense to look like, as far as being simple, and being able to run whatever you want, without a whole lot of thinking.
Yeah, so. And it seems like he wants the guys to play fast and loose, and be super confident in what they're doing at all times on the field, regardless of what play is called, right? And, to his point, if he has to keep it simple to do that, that's what he's willing to do. And if you run a well-schemed play with good fundamentals and good speed and everybody understands what's going on, regardless of whether you know what's coming as a defense, it's kind of hard to stop, right? Because the offense is just out executing you at that particular point. And Clemson definitely has the talent to do stuff like that. I really liked hearing everything that Garrett Riley was talking about. He did talk about making the quarterback feel comfortable, because if the quarterback's comfortable and the quarterback's playing fast, then good things are going to happen on offense almost every single time, right? And same thing for the wide receivers. And then he even mentioned later in his press conference about how that also creates flexibility within the offense if you get an injury on one particular side, because you keep it so simple and because it's so many reps of the same type of plays, just different formations and practice, then a receiver can then slide to the other side and so on and so forth. And it makes everybody feel super comfortable with the offense and really understand the entire scheme that's being run. So it looks like Clemson's offense is obviously heading in a different direction. I'm sure a lot of the core concepts, as both Dabo and Garrett Riley said, are still there. A lot of the terminology, I think, is changing a little bit in how they call stuff, how they sign stuff in, how they, the terminology and things like that as far as play calls. But at the end of the day, I think he's keeping it simple, especially in spring. He's really what I gathered from his press conference is just gaining an identity for this offense, and then we'll see how it rolls from there. Whatever his personnel can handle, he'll add. Whatever they can't, he'll trim, right? And I think that just sets the players up for the best success. And that's really your job as a coaching staff, right? Your job as a coaching staff is to take your players and put them in a position where they can be successful against the defense that they're playing against. And that seems to be what Garrett Riley is going to do.
All right, let's move it on to the football game that's now being scheduled for 2024 to open up the season for both Georgia Tech and Florida State. We've seen this in recent years, and really the ACC has been the forerunner of this. A lot of Boston College, I think they played Georgia Tech there a few years ago. Notre Dame's made a trip a couple times over there. There was a game from the Big Ten here this past season in 2022, Northwestern and Nebraska, but now they call on Florida State and Georgia Tech in Dublin. I'm going to assume that's a week 0 game, because typically they send those teams over there, give them week 1 off, and then they jump back into the season. So, Chris, your thoughts about this one being scheduled?
I personally love it for multiple reasons. It is expanding the brand into a completely different portion of the world. It's allowing us to showcase our university in multiple ways. A lot of people are wondering why it's Georgia Tech that we're playing. They would rather it be Notre Dame or somebody like that. I said, well, let's go fight one side of the Irish, not both. So, I mean, I'm extremely excited for it. I dropped a link on my Facebook and Twitter. They've already dropped the fan packages of what it cost for us to go over there and watch this game. So they've got packages ready for fans to go over there, and it's actually cheaper than I thought. For the plane ticket to stay, and the game tickets is like $27.50.
So, James, back when you played, would you have cared about this? Would this have been something cool, or just an annoyance, or what would have it been, you think?
I mean, it would be one. It's cool for a couple reasons. Now, from a player's perspective, it's not as cool as it is from a fan's, because they're not going to treat it like a bowl game, but it's not going to be like your regular season games. But it's going to be highly structured. So when you're on the road, you travel. Let's say they travel 3 or 4 days, so you can get used to the time zone, climate, other acclimatization. They're going to wake you up at 8 a.m. for breakfast. You're going to have meetings at 10. You're going to have a bunch of different things. Your schedule is going to be laid out for you. And they may take a team-oriented trip to where you can go see like, something that's famous or something that's known to Ireland. But for the most part, you're really not going to be able to enjoy Ireland. But for Dublin and for these people, like, it's smart because you're getting people to come here who probably will have some money one day. And you know what you're going to want to do? You may see some, you may eat some shepherd's pie, and you might be like, man, I want to come back and get some shepherd's pie from that one place. And I got a couple grand in my pocket. And some time, I'm going to go do it. I like it because there is another opportunity for me to stamp my passport. So I can go see some stuff, and I can see Celtics, Celtic traditions, and probably go get me now that I made sure I wasn't being racist. They wear kilts too. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but Irish people wear kilts. Go buy me a garnet and gold kilt, and I'm gonna go walk around and explore and do some cool stuff. And I'm gonna get some content. I'm in Atlanta now, so that's where we were gonna play Georgia Tech week 1. I've done nothing but complain about the drive because it's not far enough for me to have to just fly. It's close enough for me to be able to keep my car or my truck so I don't have to rent something. But then the traffic is everywhere, so you don't want to go anywhere. So, like, Atlanta's cool. That's really what we're looking at if we would have gone there. Yes, more FSU fans would have been able to go, but let's put it in perspective. Georgia Tech has one of the smallest stadiums in the ACC. I got news for you. You probably weren't going to that game either. So watch it in Ireland, have a good time. Maybe we only have 2,000 to 5,000 people show up. But I know this. I'm going to be there. I'm going to talk with as many people as I can to be able to get there as well. And we're going to have a good time. I mean, I don't know how many black people are in Ireland, but I know I plan on making it at least one more. And I've got about 10 other people who said that they're going to come too. So my first question was, do they eat ribs in Ireland? And if they don't, then I'm going to tell my guy Shannon, we got to hook up some Guinness glazed ribs and have a good time.
Chris, were you losing it over thinking about James in a kilt? Was that what that was?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I figured.
The most part is I want to see it. Just seeing him walk around Dublin in a kilt would be. I'm getting plenty of Photoshop. Just it'll be fun. He's going to get caught from all angles, but mine are going to count.
Might be one of the larger kilts that they sell.
Yes,
maybe.
I
figured I have to get it custom.
Yeah, he'll talk me into putting one on. I already know it's going to happen. I'll be like, oh Lord, but no, I really think it's great for the brand of not just Florida State or Georgia Tech, but for college football in the United States to expose that, as we have before. Like you said, the ACC's been pretty on the money of doing it. Like the Big Ten did it in 2022, but it to me is expanding what all different brands we have in the United States. There's so many different traditions to what we do as well, and in Ireland, they're all about tradition. So if we're able to get Chief Osceola over there to drop the spear in the middle of the field, I'm sure that we'll gain some Irish fans. So I think it's going to be really good for not just Florida State and Georgia Tech, but for college football all the way around.
And again, I want to emphasize this. It's so many of these guys. Like, I was blessed to have a lot of in the Northeast, we didn't have money, but a lot of my family, like the boys, my grandmother's brothers never left within 5 miles. So there was a concentrate. So they needed to get us to visit. They could raise $300, $500 to get us plane tickets to fly back to New Jersey from Florida. So I was able to get on a plane. I was able to see the world, or you see some mountain ridges, you see some cool different things on the flight from Atlanta to Philly or from Tallahassee to Atlanta. You saw kind of cool stuff. It opened your eyes. You'd be surprised at how many of these guys have never been on a plane until they're recruiting visit. So that tells me that a lot of these guys don't have passports. So just the idea of having 120, and I'm gonna tell you this, most Americans don't have passports, which is funny how strong-willed we are about a lot of the things that we say we are when we've never been out of the country. Some people have never been out of the state, but to have 120 young men or more, because you'll be able to take more than what you would normally take to a game, because this is a week 0 game. This isn't a regular season game, so it's considered a bonus game. I think that's cool. They'll probably make sure these guys get suits. They'll probably make sure these guys have acclimated things. So what this does for recruiting is this is just another recruiting pitch that Florida State can say, hey, we're going to play international. We're international box office boys, not just United States box office boys. But I think like one of the coolest things is taking guys through. Well, actually, I say cool, but that's going to be interesting to see. Luckily, they'll charter a flight, but they still got to go through customs. They still got to go through these things. I hope they have a camera every second of the way in this, because it's going to be funny to see guys like Ayo or guys like, I'm not suggesting he hasn't, but see some of these guys, if he hasn't, to see his first experience going through customs and also to see the customs officials look at them. They probably haven't seen this many large mammals come through in that manner. So I think, like I said, I think it's a very interesting life trip, and that's what college is about. I went to South Africa twice in college, and I don't think if I would have ever went to Florida State, I would have probably ever had that opportunity to go. So I think I'm very encouraged by it, even though part of me wants to see it be stateside, but then the other side of me, I can't knock the opportunity it is for the young men and young women who are trainers, because they'll be the ones who get a chance to party. It's the trainers. They don't have to go to film. They have to be in the training room. They'll do their thing and they'll be out. And like when we went to Boston College my senior year, which is odd because now I've been to Boston numerous times, but they went to go see the original Cheers and a lot of the other stuff, like, and they're talking about this, and I'm like, man, I like Cheers. I like Frasier. I wanted to go see this stuff, but we're locked down in the hotel. But the sport does so much for so many people outside of the guys that we root and cheer for on a day-to-day.
They had almost 43,000 at that Nebraska Northwestern game last year.
Wow.
Now, a guy who I think I didn't bring him up in the defensive end. So now I want to talk about him as a defensive tackle. And that is a guy who's, pushing 6'7", 260 pounds. Now, unfortunately, he is on campus. Perfect. And that is Collins Achiambong. I rarely get too hyped about young guys. A lot of people think he could be the next Greg Rousseau as a 6'7", 6'8" edge rusher. But I personally think we got a chance right now because he came in pushing 250 mark. He could easily be on the other end of 280 by the end. Easily. Okay. I think we got a chance with that size and a 7-foot wingspan. We have a chance at a guy like a Chris Jones, defensive tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs out of Mississippi State. We have a chance for a guy like Fletcher Cox, who's on that 6'4", 6'5", 300-pound range. I really think we have a chance with a guy like that as Collins Achiambong. Again, I'm not trying to force anything on anybody. If he wants to be an edge rusher, please give him that opportunity to do so and play the edge rush position if that's what he would like. But for me, my eyes, what I think he can be a vicious one technique, man. I mean, Mark. There's a guy who played at Miami. 15 years ago now, 12 years ago now, by the name of Calais Campbell.
Mm-hmm.
He was a defensive end guy at Miami. Played at like 230, 240. Gets to the NFL. Now he's 6'8", legit 6'8", not like 6'6" and like build at 6'8". Nah, he got to the combine and they're like, wow, this guy is 6'8". Okay, gotcha. Has a pretty nice career with the Cardinals. Has a big boom in his career with the Jaguars and now plays for my Baltimore Ravens, is doing pretty well, right? Again, just saying he's 6'8", 308 pounds. He carries it well. I mean, he carries it like it's 260. But when you have that kind of frame and you have that kind of arm length, I think you do yourself a great favor being that close to the quarterback as a 3 technique or 2-eye technique, as opposed to trying to find him off the edge, where I believe the way he carries his body type, he'll be very, very athletic against these guards, where I think he could have a great, great career as a defensive tackle when I'm talking about Collins and Cheatham Punk. So that's the reason why I had not brought him up in the defensive end edge rush part of it. I brought him up in a defensive tackle because for me, in my eyes, I envision him as a very, very stellar defensive tackle for Miami. Maybe not in 23, Mark, maybe not even in 24, but I think maybe in 2025 and on, I think he do very, very well at D tackle.
Yeah, Mark, I still think there is that wait and see moment. You know, where is that moment? And look, we thought we got it right away with the win versus Utah. It was like, okay, game one, there it is. You know, Billy Napier comes in right away, gets a win over, a Pac-12 favorite, a college football playoff favorite, and it didn't translate to anything. The very next week, Florida falls off of a cliff versus Kentucky, and the inconsistent season all throughout. So I still think they're waiting on that moment, Mark. As you said, the ever so important bump class probably wasn't as highly ranked as some prognosticators and maybe what history says it needs to be. And now, a 6-7 season and going into year 2 where you have a quarterback change, already a defensive coordinator change, but might actually be for the better. They're still waiting for that moment, the aha moment, Mark. And look, Florida could go to Utah week 1 and go beat Utah again, but then you're always going to fall back to, well, Florida did it game 1 last year and still finished 6-7. So I think even over a win versus Utah in game 1 this year, I think fans will still be wait and see mode just because of what happened last year for Florida. So I think, Mark, it's going to be a totality of a season, unless there's some big upset versus Georgia in the middle of the season, or you go on some kind of big run to where, you play in Georgia for all the SEC East marbles or something like that. But more than likely, Mark, it's going to come at the end of the season and see what Florida did versus Utah and Kentucky and Tennessee and LSU and Georgia and Florida State. I mean, there's 6 teams that is named right there. That's just going to probably determine Florida's schedule. Fans are kind of wait and see mode for what happens in those 6 big games for Billy Napier.
Well, our buddy here, Connor Johnson, after kicking you around for 4 touchdowns in the bowl game, now says even the commentators are better in the SEC. So after a kick in the rear, you get a pat on the back from Connor there.
Thanks, Connor.
David Waters, Gators Breakdown. He's the best covering Florida football. Get on over there. It's right here on YouTube. Gators Breakdown. It's also on your favorite audio platform. David, appreciate you stopping by, man.
Thanks, Mark.
I can't let you go without commenting about Graham Mertz. So Billy Napier is saying some very nice things. As you stated before, as you started, it's talking season. So we can either talk up Graham Mertz or we can talk him down, but we're not going to know until the ball is in the air in September. But I just think there's this narrative. Okay, Wisconsin, they don't produce quarterbacks. He's no good. He's not going to be any good. I think there's a lot there to work with. I'm not selling him as being a great quarterback to date. He hasn't been, but he's been good enough to start for what's typically been a top 15 to 25 team in the country. And yeah, he had to lean on a ground game, but just your thoughts about whether we're hearing legitimate optimism out of Billy Napier or just maybe a lot of coach speak.
I think it can be coach speak, Mark, but also be the truth at the same time. And look, we should be hearing he's in the building almost 24 hours a day. He is learning the playbook. I mean, that's what we should be hearing about Graham Mertz there. So, right. And now with that, it does seem like, Mark, from what I can gather, it's he is taking more of the first team reps, more so than Jack Miller right now. So really no surprise. I think we all expected when spring practice ends for Florida and they play their orange and blue game that Graham Mertz will probably be the number 1 quarterback. And, looking at it, Mark, and him coming in, I mean, 2 things can be true at the same time. Was he as good as he needed to be at Wisconsin? No. Was Wisconsin's offense doing him any favors? Also, no. I mean, it was a run on first down, run on second down. It's 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8. Hey, go make a play. Okay, that's pretty difficult there. So, how much does the offense open up for him at Florida? How much can he open up the offense? I think is a fair question as well. Did Wisconsin not open up the offense because they found him to be a limited quarterback? So I think the questions, Mark, are still going to be there. We don't know the answers till, as you said, till we see it. There is enough to say he made some bad decisions as a quarterback at Wisconsin, but there's also a lot to say that offense didn't do him any favors. So we really got to dive in. I'm sure Billy Napier did their homework. I'm sure they saw something they could unlock in him. They identified him early on in the transfer portal process. He was one of the first transfers Florida brought in the transfer portal process. He impressed them with his knowledge of the game and watching the film with them, and that was something they determined. Okay, we're going to bring him on board here. And Mark, at the time, it was because you had Jaden Rashada. You don't have to throw Jaden Rashada into the mix, and then we all know that whole saga how it turned out. Well, now you're leaning on Grant Mertz to be your guy this season for Florida. So we'll have to see, Mark. Going back and looking at, we knew Florida was probably going to hit the transfer portal for a quarterback once Anthony Richardson declared for the NFL draft, and it was, hey, can Florida bring in somebody to make up for a retooled offensive line? Can Florida bring in somebody who still may have to make up for a pretty bad defense? And does Grant Mertz fit that profile? ought to be, quote unquote, Mark, the kind of defensive coordinator in waiting with that hire there with Kevin Steele coming over from Miami. How much longer is he going to be there? How much longer is he going to coach? Of course, he's just getting hired, but he's kind of a journeyman defensive coordinator throughout his career, but also up there in age. So would he be that at Alabama for a while? And he's kind of in that. He's also why Gator fans kind of like it. He has been with Billy Napier for a while. He was part of that Louisiana staff. With Billy Napier. They sent him to Georgia for a year to learn under Kirby and that defensive staff. He came back to Louisiana. So there's a familiarity with him as well. And Mark is almost like hiring within staff because of the familiarity. He's not going to come in and change the defense a whole lot from what Patrick Toney did. Now, tendencies and how he'll call a game would change, but the defense, the base of the defense, a lot of the terminology is the same. So it's not like he's coming in and cleaning house. He's also with the same defensive staff that was with Florida last year at the same time. So, he's really the only change, and it's pretty much the same defense. And he's really highly regarded in that Billy Napier, Kirby Smart, Nick Saban little circle that they have. So I think even though he's young, Mark, he's called plays before. He's got the right background as far as the coaching circles that he's been involved with, and just the attitude change. I mean, he's a little more hype. He's a little more energetic when you see him out there. He actually talked to the media for the first time this past weekend. And the quote that got sold Gator Nation, is talking season, Mark. That's kind of what spring practice is right now. We'll see. It'll all come down to what he does on the field, of course. But he's like, the approach on defense is, we negotiate with a hammer. So that kind of lets you know the aggressiveness that he's going to come along with this Florida Gator defense with.
And when you say young, I think 29 is what I heard. 29 years old. Yeah. Dave, I think when your average college football fan thinks of Florida football, they connect it to Urban Meyer, Tim Tebow. That's the twosome that you think there. And then you think maybe even beyond that, fun and gun, Steve Spurrier. So it's all offense. But when I think Florida football and I think the Gators at their best, even as recently as Will Muschamp, for all his detractors, that's when Florida was playing Florida defense. That's the last time the Gators had, okay, this is a top 5 unit in the country. Some of the McElwain defenses were pretty decent too, as leftovers from Muschamp. Are we a long ways away from seeing that again?
Yeah, Mark, we're a long way from that. Can this Florida defense be better? Yes. It's been since 2019 that you'd even say they'd have a comparable, 2019, Mark, I guess you could say good defense, but they still failed to show up in the big games. And look, don't get me wrong, nobody was stopping LSU in 2019, but that game, they didn't show up. They didn't show up the Georgia game that year either. In two of the biggest games that year, you were still waiting for the defense to kind of break through in Todd Grantham's second year. Now, games besides that, they were okay. You could nitpick, but you would have taken 2019 defense last year for Florida just to get you to 7-8 wins probably with just a better defense. And you go to that 2020 season, Mark, and whatever happened, whether it was COVID and it messing up the season and delaying the season and development maybe getting thrown out the window because of that, whatever happened in that 2020 season, Florida's defense just hasn't been the same. No matter who's calling the plays, no matter who's been lining up on the field, it's been guys playing out of position. It's been not recruiting very well on that side of the ball. So there's been a lot to fix on that side of the ball. It's more than just a defensive coordinator there for Florida. But Mark, when you look at talent, the depth isn't there to be a Will Muschamp, as you said, Jeff Collins defense. When you want to take a look at that, with those defense, when McElwain was there, he was a defensive coordinator. Yeah, they're a long way from that. They don't have the depth. They're starting to get better depth up front due to some transfers. Cam Jackson coming from Memphis, Caleb Banks coming from Louisville, and also just the development in that area. Des Watson, Chris McClellan are names I think you can point to now that you feel pretty comfortable with. So they lose a star like Jervon Dexter, but they may actually be deeper this year. They may not have the ceiling. And Jervon Dexter played entirely way too many snaps last year. As I said, he played and kind of out of position too for what he should be playing up front on the defense. And there's no depth. He was sitting there playing 60 snaps a game. And in the SEC, and you're a defensive lineman, playing 60 snaps a game is just entirely way too much. But he had to. Florida just didn't have a lot of depth there. And then they had to hit the transfer portal for linebackers as well. Taraja Mitchell comes over from Ohio State. Deuce Spurlock comes over from Michigan. They bring back Derek Wingo. They bring back Shamar James, who was all SEC freshman. So maybe even deeper there a bit too. Mark, the biggest questions in the secondary. They got two safeties there with Miguel Mitchell, Kamari Wilson leading the charge there, but not a lot of depth behind those guys. You probably have, of course, Jason Marshall at your first cornerback spot, but who plays that second cornerback spot opposite of him? Is it Moore, the freshman that came in last year? He got hurt. And when he got hurt, you had the return of Jaden Hill, who was bouncing back from injury as well. So Devin Moore, Jaden Hill at that second cornerback spot. But really interesting, Mark, is without the depth there on that secondary for the Gators, Jaden Hill kind of cross-training, playing a little bit of star this spring as well. So Florida trying to find some depth pieces and probably be trying to find ways to get their best five on the field, and it's starting in that secondary.
David Waters, Gators Breakdown. Get on over there. It's right here on YouTube. It's also on your favorite audio platform and one of the top audio podcasts in all of college football. Jamarcus Weston moving from offense to defense. Is that just a depth move, or is he expected, like, this dude's an athlete, he might be able to go over there and make plays?
Both, Mark. Hill actually spoke on that this past week and did say, Jamarcus Weston was recruited as a wide receiver. Could never really break through. I mean, Dan Mullen always talked him up and being one of the fastest players on the team. And we just haven't seen it, Mark. So I guess he's, instead of, and credit to him too, Mark, I'll give him some credit too. You could probably tell he just wants to be at Florida. He could probably transfer and go play wide receiver somewhere else with the way the transfer portal works now. But he's staying. He's switching positions, going to go switch to the defense and become a safety there for the Gators. And we'll see if that athleticism can be untapped with a new look defensive coordinator. And Mark, probably one headline that should not be overlooked is Corey Raymond taking over the entire secondary now. He was just coaching the cornerbacks last year. Of course, but now he's over the entire secondary. And that was something that was going to happen before Patrick Toney left and Austin Armstrong comes in anyway. But now Corey Raymond has one voice over that entire secondary. So you hope the communication's better on that back end, and now bringing somebody like Jamarcus Weston in. Mark, as I said, Florida, they got two safeties they can really count on right now in Kamari Wilson and Miguel Mitchell, but not much behind those two guys as far as proven depth goes at the safety position. So that you're looking for Jamarcus Weston to hopefully get some untapped potential with his athleticism at the safety spot. I wouldn't expect an immediate contribution this spring, but maybe when spring ends and some more reps in the fall, he can be a contributor there.
Fresh 3542 believes that the interior defensive front needs some help in the transfer portal. And also Fresh 3542 is looking for another linebacker.
I don't know if we have any more rosters for another linebacker, but he's right about defensive tackle, Mark. It's a lot of hit or miss right now, especially somebody that you could just – there was a young man out of Kentucky. I can't think of his name right now. He was like 6'3", 320, hit the portal. I don't know if he landed somewhere or if he just got his scholarship renewed at Kentucky. But that was somebody I thought Miami should pursue and go after and bring in. Someone that could solidify that 2-eye, that one technique, who takes pride in doing so. Because that's the job that not a lot of people want to do. I bring this up ad nauseum. You remember Gerald Willis. You remember RJ McIntosh. But do you remember who was playing opposite of them that did all the dirty work for them to get the free one-on-ones and spree techniques? Kendrick Norton did that for RJ McIntosh. Okay. And then John Ford and Pat Bethel kind of did that for Gerald Willis as a 3-tech. But more importantly, specifically talking about how those two of Norton and McIntosh just did. Norton took on that to allow McIntosh to backdoor plays, to just shoot in whatever gap, because he was willing to take on the center and the guard majority of the time, and then eventually make his plays when they were there to be made. But that's a big thing, and having somebody who has a psyche that wants to do that takes pride in maintaining that gap, that takes pride in still making plays as a true, as you would call, nose in certain schemes is big. So I agree wholeheartedly.
Your defensive tackle that you're trying to come up with is Justin Rogers. He was a top 50 player in the country, a 5-star out of Michigan who played at Kentucky. He is transferred to Auburn. That's a great fit. That's a great fit, man. And we'll probably end up playing him too.
I know we get on their schedule here soon. We set up a home and home with them. I don't know if it's 4-5, 24-25, or it's 25-26, but I know that.
Kyloran,
Tallahassee
Miami
fan.
Kane, appreciate you being here as always, man. Says Trailer Hassey fan told me they stole Miami's best player.
For some reason, they have this understanding that Daryl Jackson was just this amazing player. Hey, I don't like to hate on young men, especially because what do you get in that? But Daryl Jackson had some plays last season that were great, and he also had some times where he may not be put in the best position to be successful. Good for him as far as going home and being able to do it for Tallahassee. But oh well. I disagree. Okay, I disagree that he took our best player, but it's hard to find good players when you look at that 5-17 as far as how they played down in and down out last season. Now, recruiting, you look at NCAA ratings, or you look at preseason poll. Yeah, Miami had a bunch of good players on it. Miami had a bunch of talent on it. I don't know where all that talent and good players were in certain games last year. I'm going to say majority of the games, 90% of the games last season. Okay. Now I got to get into Chance Williams. Okay. Now Chance Williams came to Miami as a borderline 5-star like a couple years back, and things have been kind of back and forth with Chance Williams. He flashed a little bit as a freshman in 2021, didn't have the biggest statistical season in 2022, and even towards the end of 2021, didn't really jump off the screen too much. I want to be very careful because I don't want to come off as bashing a young man because players don't deserve that. But what I am saying is that I'm hoping he could take another step and really give us something off that edge. I mean, this is not it. But again, you talk about being on a bad team. You talk about snaps. How many snaps do you give out? Miami goes out there and plays 6 snaps and gives up an 80-yard bomb. How many young men get a chance to rotate in there? When you're winning games or you're scoring points, then we get to really rotate that defensive line and rush the passer. And those are things that we did not do last year. So, again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to Chance Williams or any player that I'm a little critical of that wears the orange and green because they're still human. They're still people. They're still players that can improve themselves, and their career is not over just yet. But I would love to see more out of Chance Williams. He was a very highly sought-after player coming out of high school. Chose Miami for reasons. He chose Miami, and he's a nice return on investment. Had a sack and a half against Alabama in 2021. So there's something that he flashed there in that game. It's just I haven't really seen that since that nice stretch there. So